Hi, everyone. My name is Rabbi Chanoch Kaplan from Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, and I welcome you here to the first installment of How to Be a Seder Leader. At the Passover Seder, you'll know that your child might need a little more Jewish education if they ask when the potato latkes are being served. If when it comes time to welcome Elijah, they look to the chimney. If they think that Ma Nishtana is a reference to grandma. If they ask to see your tax returns when it comes time to make an afikomen gift request. Or if they punch you when the Haggadah talks about blunting the teeth of the wicked one. In all seriousness, we're going to go on a journey through leading the Seder and hopefully giving you some of the tools that will help you both lead and run a proper kosher Seder. This is going to be done in two parts. The first part, we're going to be first beginning with appreciating the why. The second part, we're talking about you, about how you can maximize your ability to conduct the Seder in an efficient, proper, kosher, productive, and really engaging way. And finally, we'll be showing you how to set things up. In the second installment of the How to Lead a Seder class, we're going to be going through the Haggadah from A to Z, from start to finish, showing you everything that needs to be done. And my hope is that when we're done with this, you will feel much more confident about your ability to conduct a beautiful Passover Seder this year. The best way to start any speech or any class is really with a story. Because since we were children, we are trained and conditioned to relax, to slow our breathing, and to simply lay back and leave all of our adult filters away. When you were going to sleep and your mom said, okay, it's story time, that's when you knew it was okay to drift away. So I'd like to start with a story here too. A number of years ago at our public Seder, which would accommodate between 120 and 150 people, I asked everyone what type of sacrifice they may have made to be there that Monday evening at the start of the work week. And everybody shared a little this, a little that. For some it was very difficult, and for some less so. And then I said, I want to share one story of a girl who was an aspiring actress and had worked so hard to build a career. And finally, she hit gold. She hit pay dirt. She made it into a central role in a Disney movie. She was elated. She did an incredible job working on it for an entire year. And then opening night, the evening when the director, the producer, the funders, and all the who's who of Hollywood were going to be there, for whatever reason it was scheduled on Seder evening. And I said, nonetheless, this girl, with the weight that she was carrying of 3,000 years of Seder traditions, made the incredibly difficult choice to attend a Seder nonetheless. Everyone was amazed. And then I said, and this girl is present right here at our Seder tonight. Everyone looked around and I asked her to stand up, and they followed suit with a standing ovation. If she could sacrifice to that extent, I think that even given the extenuating circumstances of this year, I think we can all sacrifice just a little bit to make sure our Seder will be held in our homes, even if a little bit different than usual, and that we can do it successfully. But before we even get there, we have to ask, why should we? Why is the Seder still relevant? After 3,300 years, are we finishing somebody else's dinner? Is this relevant to us? In fact, for many people, the Seder has become not much more than just a social event, and I can understand and appreciate why. All the family is getting together. Everybody's so excited to see one another. And then the kids go off to another room, perhaps. They're catching up, playing games. Some of the people end up on their phones. Somebody's fighting with somebody else. A lot goes on, but again, it's devolved into more of a social scene than a Passover Seder. And this year, perhaps, is the greatest opportunity to reclaim the original traditional Seder and to get to the depth of meaning behind it. So what is the secret of the oldest Jewish story? We've been telling it for 3,300 years across civilizations, across continents. You know, we've only been here in America for 500 years, and when the original pilgrims came over and landed on Plymouth Rock, what was the food that they ate on the Mayflower boat? Not once they arrived, but on the Mayflower. What were they eating? We can speculate. Maybe there is some arcane history book that does contain some references or detail what types of food they had. But generally, we have no record of that. And yet we do know exactly what the Jewish people ate on their journey out of Egypt into the desert. In fact, every Jewish child across the world knows that with impeccable precision. So, what's the secret? How are we going to convey this to our audience at the Seder? What's important to remember is this Seder dinner is not a commemoration. Rather, it's a dynamic, experiential, multi-sensory framework to nurture the foundational Jewish message, which is encapsulated in one of the central phrases of the Exodus story. Most people are familiar with this phrase, "Let my people go." Many people are not familiar with the second half of this phrase. "Let my people go so that they may serve me. Thus says the God of the Hebrews." Think about that. Let my people go so that they may serve me. Liberation from shackles is not freedom. That's the first step in the process. But you are not truly free until you have been living the purpose for which you were created. Until you have discovered that divine mission, which is central and serves as the very basis to life itself. Until then, your freedom is not yet a real freedom. And this is the important message, that freedom is living in service of our divine mission, within the narrative of the purpose of creation. And the reason why it's so important to convey this is because this message never ends. It's as relevant today as it was back then, and perhaps you might even say it's more relevant today, as people are a bit farmished, a bit confused about what freedom really means. One more thing before we begin our Seder preparations, and this is very important for you to appreciate so that you can convey it to others as well. And you can show the enthusiasm and excitement necessary to conduct the Seder in a successful way. There is so much minutiae in Jewish life. 613 mitzvot to do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Especially when it comes to Passover. Passover is incredibly arduous, incredibly onerous. And then the Seder, wow. 3.5 ounces, not less. Drink the whole thing, or at the minimum, drink half. Half a matzah, not less. Better to have a whole matzah. Lean to the left, not to the right. Start, finish, don't start. Talk, don't talk. Uncover, cover. It doesn't stop. Why all the attention to detail, and why, indeed, is it so important? There was a beautiful story of a man who once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had drifted away from the tradition and religion of his youth. And he asked the Rebbe one simple question. He says, Rebbe, he was pained by this question, confused too. He said, Rebbe, why does such a great God need all of our little ritual? Great God, little ritual. Doesn't fit. So the Rebbe said, I don't understand your question. And believing that the Rebbe didn't understand English well enough, he began to paraphrase in Yiddish. And the Rebbe stopped him and said, no, I understand what you're saying, but it's not a question. It's not that God needs it. It's that God is giving us the most incredible gift, an opportunity to have an intimate relationship with Him, built on all different things that God requests of us to do. So, yes, we're doing it for God, but we're really doing it as a means, as a channel for us to have a relationship with the great, divine, infinite being, the Creator Himself. What an incredible opportunity. Hence, all the minutiae. It's God's gift to the Jewish people and to mankind. So now let's jump right into it. Seder. What does Seder mean? Seder means the order. It's the order of how you get everything done. And if you follow this order, the 15 steps of the Seder, voila, you've achieved success. So here's what you'll need to have your Seder ready so that you can, in fact, successfully conclude the Seder evening and the Seder dinner. First of all, you'll have to start with a Haggadah. Best thing is to have matching Haggadahs. Haggadah means to tell the story of Passover, which is one of these central mitzvot, one of the central commandments of the evening. This one here is a classic. It is not the Maxwell House, but it's more of a modern classic, and it's a beautiful Haggadah. It doesn't contain much insight, but it will tell you everything that you need to do, and it has everything included there which you'll need. So if everybody has the same one, that will make it much more simple for people to follow along and to be on the same Haggadah, no pun intended. This one here is actually my favorite. And as a Seder leader, you might want to consider getting it. You can ask your local Chabad rabbi for help, or you can get it on the web as well. And it's printed by Kahot, K-E-H-O-T, and it's compiled by Rabbi Yosef Marcus. Brilliant insights, beautifully laid out, and simply an incredible guide in every way for the Seder. So I would really encourage you, if you'd like to lead it, this is an incredible resource to prepare if you're going to be leading the Seder and to really understand what's going on and have what to share. Again, my personal favorite. Next, you'll need matzah. Hearth-baked artisan flatbread called handmade shmura matzah is the best. You'll need at least 3 if you're just having a private Seder for a couple, but you'll need more if you're going to be having a Seder with other people present, children and other family members. You can also use the machine-made square matzah, but this is preferred as it really harkens back to the original, and it's called the matzah of faith, the bread of faith. It's the toil and the labor that goes into it that, in a certain sense, gives it its worth, its value, its meaning. The 3 matzahs, which we're going to put on our Seder plate at this time, and if you don't have a Seder plate, I'll talk about that in a moment. But the matzah on the bottom symbolizes the spiritual class of the Israelites, of the Yisrael. The matzah which goes on top of it symbolizes the spiritual class of the Levites. And finally, the one that sits on top of them is the spiritual class of the Kohanim, of the Jewish priestly clan. It represents the entirety of the Jewish people. 3 matzot is the influence of the 3 patriarchs, whose influence has been felt throughout our history and is present here at our Seder this evening. Not this evening, but you know what I mean. The 4 cups of wine that we're going to reference in a moment, those represent the influence of the 4 matriarchs, whose influence is present throughout all our generations. Okay, for the wine, you're going to need 4 cups of wine. And that's because the tradition mandates that the symbolism of the 4 expressions of redemption with which God promises the Jewish people that He will liberate them from Egypt be represented by a cup of wine. Hence, we have 4 cups. My suggestion is that you find a low alcohol content wine, like this here, 5.5%, rather than this tasty wine here, which has a 13.5% alcohol volume. You drink 4 cups of this, your head might be spinning. You drink 4 cups of this, you're just a little bit happier and much better suited to be leading the Seder. Now, you might be thinking, what's the big deal? I can just sip. Well, yes, you can. But if you just sip the wine, you're not actually fulfilling the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to drink 4 cups of wine. The minimum size of a cup is 3.5 ounces, which means a 1 or 2 ounce shot glass will not do to meet the requirements. So 3.5 ounces, and you should drink at least the majority of the cup, but better if you actually completely drink the cup from top to bottom. Wash it down, bottoms up. L'chaim. Okay, moving right along. We have our traditional toolbox, which is the Seder plate. The Seder plate allows us to have at hand, the different items that we'll need to conduct the Seder. We're going to start with the zeroah. The zeroah is either a chicken neck or a chicken leg, a drumstick. We're going to put this right up here in my Seder plate, and it should preferably be burned to a crisp so that it's not really edible, since it does represent the Paschal lamb, the special Pesach offering, which we are not allowed to offer, sadly, during modern times, since we do not have a holy temple in Jerusalem. Next, we're going to move on to the egg. It's a hard-boiled egg. The symbolism behind that is the Jewish people are compared to an egg in a certain sense. Many things which are boiled in hot water turn soft and mushy. Not so with an egg. An egg becomes harder, becomes solid, strong. And that perhaps is a good reference to the Jewish people. Our struggles, our challenges, the oppression of Jewish people only serves to strengthen our resolve and commitment to carrying out the fundamental mission for which we were put here on this world. So we got our egg right here. Next, we're going to do the karpas. Karpas in Hebrew is a reference to the 600,000 who suffered and slaved away. And the onion is perhaps preferred because of its multi-layered constitution. You see how even when you pull off one layer, you get to another and another. And that's a symbol of what real slavery is like. It doesn't stop. Just when you think you've finished, it starts all over again. So the karpas is going to go up here. We're going to put some charoset on our plate as well. The charoset is a mixture of walnuts, apples, sugar, cinnamon, and maybe some other spices that you have in your family tradition. The symbolism is that of the mortar, the bricks, the clay that the Jewish people slaved with. So I'm going to take a little spoonful here and put it onto my Seder plate. Now we're going to have the maror. The maror means bitter herbs, And there are 2 ways to fulfill this. We use both of them. A piece of romaine lettuce, and since we're going to need that twice, once for the maror, eaten plain, and the second time for the korech sandwich. So we're going to be setting up 2 of these on our Seder plate, and I have some prepared horseradish here. Best to use horseradish that is not flavored with beets or sugar, since the mitzvah itself should be fulfilled with a raw product, not with something that is sweetened. I will take some horseradish, put it onto each of the pieces of romaine lettuce. Now, why romaine? You might be thinking, what type of maror, bitter herbs is there in romaine? It's actually not bitter, except if you leave it on the stalk for too long. The longer you leave it, the more bitter it gets, and that's an appropriate reference for the type of slavery that the Jewish people had. You see, it occurred very, very slowly. It almost wasn't recognizable at first. It was like the experiment with the frogs, when a frog was put into hot water, and again, this was a scientific experiment, not a Jewish experiment. The frog immediately jumps out because it senses the danger involved. And yet, when they tried the experiment by putting a frog into the water and having the water heat up slowly, slowly. Unfortunately, the frog died because it never understood the danger that was lurking just ahead. And in a certain sense, that really represents the dynamic of the Egyptian slavery and even of something like the Holocaust. Hitler understood. He took the biblical lesson of Pharaoh. Started off slowly. It seems innocuous. It doesn't scare people or frighten people the way it really should. But slowly, slowly, it grows over time until, sadly, it's too late. Society changes our values slowly, slowly. We don't even realize the influence it holds over us. And one day we wake up and we scratch our heads and say, where are we? How did we get here? We don't even know how it happened. So the romaine lettuce, which begins sweet and eventually ends up bitter, in a certain sense best represents the maror, the bitter herbs. And finally, you'll want to prepare the salt water so that when you need to dip the karpas in salt water, you'll be all ready to go. I want to share with you a couple of my hacks. This plate here looks like a Seder plate. And just running back to the Seder plate, it doesn't really matter if it's a silver one, if it's a glass one, or even if it's a plastic one, or frankly, if you don't have anything, you can just use a plastic plate or even a placemat, or just set it up on napkins on your table. What's important is that you have the items ready to go. But the reason why this is great is, and you can get these on Amazon, by the way, I think that's where I got them. Rather than do the communal bowl that is passed around, and especially for this year when you want to be extra careful, if everyone has their own set of necessary Seder items preset from before the Seder, it will really help things to go through in an expeditious way and will allow for a much more enjoyable Seder without the delay of waiting for bowls to be passed around. Everyone can immediately join with the Seder leader in partaking of the next step. So really, really encourage this. This is a great thing to do. What else? You'll obviously need to have a meal. It doesn't have to be the most sophisticated meal, but there are many Seder favorites, such as the gefilte fish and the tzimmis, which is made from carrots and raisins and maybe pineapple or whatever special family recipe you have. The brisket, the matzah bowl soup. These are all appropriate foods for a Seder, but then again, a Seder is, or the Seder meal is a meal. So whatever you enjoy and is appropriate. It's also good to spend a little more in the Seder and make it a beautiful time and a beautiful meal. And finally, you might want to have a pillow for leaning. That's because when we do eat the matzah and when we do drink the wine, we lean to the left as a sign of a liberated people, as they used to do back in ancient times. Finally, you may want to have one of these. It's a afikomen bag. And that means when we break the matzah, and we get to the tradition of the afikomen, where the children either hide it or the adult hides it and somebody has to find it, you'll be all ready to go with a nice bag that will protect the matzah as it's being hidden. And then some people have the tradition not to make their matzah wet at all. And you might be thinking, what? What do you mean, don't make the matzah wet? How do you make matzah bowl soup if not for making matzah wet? Well, yes, some people do have that tradition. And as such, they'll distribute to everyone at the table a special matzah bag. It can be a Ziploc bag or just a plain old bag, or it can be one of these cute little matzah bags. And that way, nobody's crumbs get spread all over the table and the matzah remains dry. Now I want to tell you a little bit about my modern toolbox for the Seder. I'm going to start with a plagues bag. This can also be obtained on the internet. You can see here it says plagues bag, Passover Seder, enrichment toy. This has a different little toy for all of the 10 plagues. And at my Seder, when I go through the 10 plagues, I use these little things just to make it a bit more interactive for the kids. Here we have wild beasts. Here we have the dead animal for pestilence. I have a frog in there. I got a little squirt bottle of blood for the plague of blood. Disappearing ink is what they call it, and some other little tchotchkes in here. So this is a great thing to use. For the really young ones, they have this plush little Seder plate set that's got its own egg, and here's a potato for the karpas. I mentioned before that we use an onion, but really any vegetable is okay. This represents the charoset, which has apple, that's your shankbone, and this is your bitter herbs and your romaine lettuce right over here. Frogs. Everybody loves frogs, right? Little frogs on your table make for a nice decoration. Just don't eat them. They are not kosher. We have here this little game where you stick something on your head. Now, I haven't seen what this says. And everyone at the table, without using any words, just through behaviors and acting out alone, has to get me to figure out what word is on my head. It's not my name. I know that. I wonder what it is. Smells good. I hear you. Yes. Brisket. I got it. Successful. Plagues, simple child, Pharaoh, Moses, whatever you want. Put it on, but obviously having something that is related to the Passover Seder will make the game all the more appropriate. Toys. Toys always help. Kids love prizes. Buy some stuff before the Seder and offer the kids prizes for their participation. I have my handy little matzah pillow here, a little matzah man straw, and anything else that your kids, if you do have kids there, enjoy. What else? Costumes. I'm not really into the costume thing, but some people, especially Sephardim, those of the Sephardic tradition, have stuff like this. And if you want to make one on your own, you can just take a pillowcase and just tie a belt or a string around, and that really works nicely. In addition, I have some other plagues here that I bring out just to spice things up. We got a big flying locust. Watch out. By the way, there are real locust plagues that are going on around the world these days, and I have a massive frog here, which will take up our entire screen, so I'm not going to show that. Two more things. Random pictures. Anything. Make it a book, a magnifying glass, a shoe, a bed, a window, a sun, a calendar, anything. I give these out to everybody. And then have them come up with some association of their own personal making between the image that they received, the picture they received, and the Passover Seder. And what's beautiful is you will find people come up with the most creative ideas. And it really spices up the Seder, gets people thinking, and gets people in the mode of asking questions, which really is what the Passover Seder is all about. And this is where my favorite and final suggestion comes in. This game here, How Do You Do Passover Edition. I love this. This really stimulates conversation and discussion at the Seder. And I'm going to just share a couple of these with you to give you a sense of what they are. Your local Chabad rabbi can help you get these, or you can get it on Amazon.com. So what Passover-related slogan did a U.S. astronaut shout while on a moonwalk? Those of you who were around in the 70s and were old enough to remember might recall this because it was astounding. In 1973, Apollo 17 astronaut Gene Cernan shouted, "Man, oh man, a Shevitz," the matzah company's slogan, in the middle of his moonwalk. Here's a thinking one. If Pharaoh was so evil, why did God create him? That's a modern question too. In fact, it's a question for every day. Why is there evil in the world? Why is there coronavirus in the world? That should get everybody talking and thinking. Another one, in what ways are we as a society enslaved today? You know, in a certain sense, we've been enslaved and conforming to society, especially over the last 20, 30 years with the growth and the advent of the technological age. And maybe this time when we're back in our homes is the anti-enslavement to society. It's when we have to return to ourselves and rediscover who we are. It's also a great conversation starter. Trivia. In what year and in which city was the Haggadah first printed? The answer, by the way, is in Spain in 1482. A personal one. What is your funniest Seder memory? Another thinking one. If you could time travel to another period in Jewish history, whose Seder would you visit? Mine? Okay. So we are wrapping up here, getting towards the end. And I want to remind you that ultimately, as the conductor, you need to be also a storyteller an inspirer, an enchanter, an actor. You need to wear as many hats as possible, and you need to prepare. Prepare stories, prepare ideas, and prepare personal anecdotes and memories that will spice it up and really bring it home for your family. A couple of practical things. This year, it's a 3-day holiday, which means the first 2 days of Passover, which are the Shabbat-like days that we don't do any work, lead right into Shabbat, which presents a problem with cooking on the holiday for Shabbat. There is something called an Eruv Tafshilin, which must be done before the holiday. You can look up further information online on Chabad.org. It's spelled ERUVTAVSHILIN. And a simple search will bring up information on what to do and how to do it. In the New York region this year, 2020, candlelighting is about 7:10 p.m. We'll recite 2 blessings, one for the holiday and one a Shehechianu blessing, thanking God for bringing us to this day when once again we have the opportunity to celebrate together. Shehechianu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Amen. You can find that and more information on Chabad.org. But the Seder does not begin until about 8:20, and that's because, you see, before 8:20, before dark, at least in the New York area, it's not actually Passover yet. So it's like lighting a menorah on Purim, or like blowing shofar on Hanukkah. It just doesn't do anything. It doesn't push the buttons that we need to push. It's not a mitzvah. So you can start by having a small meal earlier. Just don't serve anything that is going to be served at the Passover Seder, certainly not anything that's on the Seder plate. Also, take an afternoon nap. An afternoon nap is a great thing both for adults and for children, and we'll keep them up. And also, it's important, you might be saying, well, my kids have to participate. Aren't they one of the most important parts? Yes. But you also have to remember, if Judaism is going to be a 5-year-old's Judaism, if your Seder will be appropriate for a 5-year-old, what's going to attract them at 15? You think they're going to find a 5-year-old Seder stimulating at the age of 15 or 20 or 30? That's where we're losing it, people. Judaism is for adults, just like children should not play with fire. Children don't belong playing with Judaism. Yes, we engage them, we teach them, but it's not for playing. It's an adult thing. It's all about meaning and purpose. Kids don't necessarily get that. So don't dumb it down. Don't lower the standards. Don't lower the Torah down to the children. Someone once made a suggestion of lowering the mezuzah on the doorpost so that kids could touch it. It sounds beautiful, but it's oh so wrong. Kids should always aspire to be lifted up. And if they can't reach it today, pick them up, raise them up so they can touch it. And let them reach. Let them keep reaching higher and higher until that day that they will be able to properly participate. Same with the Seder. If they fall asleep, that's okay. Next year, they'll strive to stay up and be like the adults. And the next year, they will even more. I remember how proud I was when I finally stayed up for the entire Seder. And the next day in the synagogue, all the kids bragging about whose Seder went later. Yeah, of course, my Seder went until 8:30 a.m. and I stayed up the entire time. Sure. Make your Seder beautiful. Make it kosher. Make it a traditional Seder. And reclaim what has made the Seder the longest observed meal in the entire world at 3,300 years and still going strong. Join me for the second installment of How to Be a Seder Leader coming up.